Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Since we are in the mindset of speculating and predicting about future updates, I wanted to do this video on my top 10 most likely features I believe will be coming in the next feature pack. There has been almost no word from the devs about when this thing will come out. We are looking very far into the future at this point, definitely past Season 2 of The Living World, which should last at least 6 months or so, I would predict, but still, I would find this interesting to look at. I honestly found myself, shortly after the first feature pack released, wondering what other cool things they could add to the game. Turns out, if you sit down for a second or two and think about it, there's a hell of a lot. I will clarify, this video isn't going to be talking about small quality of life changes. In my research for this, I saw a really cool post that someone did over in the forums in the suggestions section where they listed out tons of really nice, quirky, small UI and quality of life based changes. I'm actually not going to go into that. These are 10 big features that I think deserve a spot in the next feature pack. I could have ordered this top 10 list in two ways. Number one, things that I was most excited to see, starting with least excited, ending at most excited. Or number two, on how likely I think they are to be in the game. And I'm going to do it on the latter. I'm going to do a top 10 on how likely I think they'll be. And I'm going to start with the most likely and work my way down to least likely. Anyway, so let's do it. Starting with number one. The most likely thing I think will be coming in the next feature pack is Jewelcrafting 500. Over the past year or so, Arena have slowly been rolling out the idea of ascended equipment. When the game launched, they had exotic equipment, which they originally envisioned to be insanely difficult, very hard to find gear, but was ultimately very easy for us to get because of oversights in their design, such as the fact you could get exotic gear almost guaranteed from map completion. This was opposed to the insanely low drop chance for getting an exotic from a random mob in general areas. To address this, a few months after launch, with the Fractals update, ArenaNet gave us our new and final tier of gear, known as Ascended Gear. They have not gone back on their promise to add more tiers of gear after this, and I fully believe they will not add more tiers of gear, but I think Jewelcrafting 500 will be the final piece to that puzzle. They slowly rolled out Ascended Gear, beginning with trinkets. These trinkets were not craftable in any way, but rather awarded to you for completing certain types of content in the game. First fractals, later in exchange for laurels, which were tied to daily rewards, beyond that with guild missions, and finally when they had ascended weapons and ascended armor, the ascended stuff was tied to crafting. This means that most crafts in Guild Wars 2 had their cap raised from the default of 400, which was used for crafting exotics, to a new 500 for crafting ascended stuff, something that is really quite an arduous and long process. But there are two types of crafting in Guild Wars 2 that currently do not have tier 500 associated with them. One of them is cooking, which I don't think we'll see be updated for a while, though it's certainly an interesting idea that the new feature patch would update cooking to 500 and give us ascended quality foods, for example, but also gem crafting. Classically, jewel crafting, rather I should say, was used in the making of trinkets. But what place would that have in Guild Wars 2 now? Let's say they do increase the cap up to 500. What does this enable us to do? Are we now allowed to craft our ascended stuff and basically undercut the processes in-game already to acquire this stuff? Do we no longer need to do guild missions? Are we no longer promoted to do a variety of content to get our ascended trinkets? Can we just craft it all, which basically means can we just buy it all with gold and then convert the mats into the stuff we want? I personally don't believe that ArenaNet will do this. The idea of going all the way up to ascended tier equipment shouldn't just be something that takes a long time, but also something that encourages you to play a wide variety of what Guild Wars 2 has to offer, at least within PvE. That said, I do still believe there is a place for Jewelcrafting 500. While there are a wide variety of stat combinations you can craft for armor and weapons in the game, there are an awful lot of stat combos that do exist and are completely unavailable as trinkets. On my healing power elementalist, I wanted a full set of Magi's gear. This is healing power major stat, precision and vitality minor stat, but these only exist for armor and weapons. When it came to getting ascended quality stuff over on the trinket side, that wasn't an option for me. I had to instead go for clerics. I believe that when Jewelcrafting 500 comes out, this will be our opportunity to craft those other stat sets. And in order to do this, I still believe we will be required to go through the current systems we already are. Let's look at accessories, for example. Right now, you get ascended accessories for doing guild missions. I think after the patch, you'll be able to craft ascended accessories, but the process of crafting them will require an item that is still only purchasable with the guild commendations. This way we're still doing the same content ArenaNet intended for us to do. We're still experiencing a variety of PvE, but crafting is now a component and crafting has a place in the game. That's what I think gem crafting is most likely to be. I was talking to Brazil just the other day about gem crafting 500, and he put forward a very interesting suggestion to me about it also, and this is the idea of infusions in the game. Currently, once you get ascended gear, you can go through a very long, very expensive process of filling that ascended gear with infusions that give you more stats. For example, if you went for full power infusions, which is what I'm currently going for in game, I can get a total of plus 70 power that otherwise I wouldn't have. Jewelcrafting 500 would be a really good place for ArenaNet to expand on that infusion system, whether giving us more agony resist with the infusions, different types of infusions such as ferocity infusions which don't currently exist in the game, or even infusions that give us more than plus 5, perhaps plus 7, or plus 10 beyond that. I think ideal world, I would like to see all of that be incorporated into Jewelcrafting 500, but maybe not all of it will be there. But that is definitely something I would expect to be in the feature patch, and that is why it is the top of my list. Number 2, colored commander tags. This was something that was data mined a while ago. I believe there may have been official statements from devs about also the idea of revamping the commander tag system currently seen in Guild Wars 2 and, among other things, making it account bound. I think number one thing we will definitely see is the commander tags become account bound. This was actually something many people were expecting from this feature pack, so it will definitely be there for the second one, if not beforehand. And I believe they will be expanding on that system, allowing people to change the color of the commander tag that they wish, and adding a more difficult process of acquiring the tag beyond spending just a straight up sum of gold. Personally, as a player, it's never really bothered me that much that the commander tags cost gold, but as the economy has become more inflated, the idea of spending 100 gold on the tag has become more and more trivial over time. This does mean it's becoming more of a thing your average guy can buy just so he can troll every now and then. And yes, you can troll with commander tags rather easily, especially when it comes to World vs. World. I think they had interesting ideas with their commander system that you could see they were toying with even in a few of the updates after launch, but have since dropped and focused on other things, such as when they added the ability to have all different marks. /squad join currently isn't amazing. There should be a lot more UI to support it in the game, and I think that ArenaNet value that as a priority that should make its way, at least for the account bound tags, into the second feature pack. And of course, many of these other crazy ideas put forward by the community may see their way weaseled in there also. Number 3. New traits and even utilities. Yes, this is a pretty safe bet. Of course, we are at the top of the list. I think everything I'm saying right now is a safe bet. What did we get with this feature pack? We had a little bit of that horizontal progression ArenaNet have been promising us for a while. Of course, there came balance changes, but there were also new Grandmasters introduced to the game, and an entirely new trait system that supports the addition of even more traits. I think next feature pack, not only are we going to get more Grandmasters, probably one for each line again, but I also think we'll get a variety of new Master and Adept traits also. They didn't set up this system with the current feature pack just to leave it in the dust now. Definitely horizontal progression is a big focus for them now that all of the Ascended gear has been rolled out into the game, and they don't want to throw out any more power creep, especially where PvE is concerned. So these are the kinds of things that we'll be seeing. Not only do I say traits will be coming in the game, but I also think that Guild Wars 2 is at a point now where many players are looking for new utility skills. Not just new utility skills like we saw a new heal skill come in the game, but entire new classes of utility skills and the traits to match. This is why I say that there will probably be more than Grandmaster traits in the next feature pack. We'll probably see new Master and Adept ones, because these traits will be things that interact with new classes of utilities that come in. If you're feeling a little bit lost about what I'm talking about right now, think about signets. Most classes have a class of utility skill known as signets available to them. They also have traits that impact signets, lower their cooldowns, give them bonus effects, increase their power. This is what I think we'll see with new classes of utility skills that are in keeping with the way the profession in general works. Of course, the feature pack will come with more rebalances. ArenaNet actually made some worrying statements that many of their profession and combat balance would only be coming with feature packs, and I think this is going to be a huge mistake. But if they do stick with that, we'll definitely be seeing more balance changes and, you know, another shift in the PvP meta, for example, way down the line with the next feature pack. Hopefully I'm proved wrong and they do some balance changes in between, some serious balance changes, but I don't think that's the way they're working at the moment. Number 4. Precursor scavenger hunts. Yeah, now we're getting a little bit more risky, but I'm laying it down. I think the next feature pack will absolutely have the Precursor scavenger hunt. This is like the #1 thing in Guild Wars 2. If there is anything that is the epitome of a promised feature, something that Guild Wars 2 needs, there's been so many things on this list since launch. The idea of spectator mode for PvP, the idea of a PvE wardrobe, common basic things every player has wanted in the game. This has been on that list. This has been promised to us by the devs for a long time, well over a year, and been delayed, been delayed, been delayed. They outright stated that this was being worked on, development had been made with it, but again it was put on hold because of the current feature pack, and now I believe they will pick up work on that, and that will be in the next one. It's been long enough, and I've been very pessimistic about this feature coming into Guild Wars 2 for a long while, but finally I think that the game is in a position where not only do I consider this a priority they can now focus on, but so should ArenaNet. Precursor scavenger hunts will come in with the next feature pack. If you're unaware what this feature generally entails, currently legendaries are one of the biggest endgame goals you can go for in this game, and a huge component of crafting one comes from a precursor. These precursors can cost in the order of thousands of gold and are only available through RNG. Either you grind like mad and pay vastly inflated prices on the trading post, or you play the random number generator game and either get very, very happy and make all your friends jealous, or you go home, possibly even quit the game because you've wasted more than thousands of gold and not got lucky on the lottery. I believe a surefire way to acquire a precursor will be available in the next feature pack. Further, I believe this will be tied into multiple systems in the game. I think an element of it will come from 500 crafting or various weaponsmithing disciplines, and I also believe that world completion, achievements, and exploration will factor in it in some way as well. They have been calling it a scavenger hunt, and the fact that they have been working on this for a while tells me that they're at least going for something special. Maybe the final implementation won't be phenomenal, but they're at least trying, and I think it will be more complicated than just grinding out a meta achievement, for example, and being done with it. Another stipulation I will say, there's probably going to be rage about Precursor Scavenger Hunt when it finally comes in, or Precursor Crafting, because I think many players in this community are expecting this to be an easy way to get a precursor rather than a surefire way to get a precursor. I think it will still take a lot of grind, a lot of effort, but you'll feel more rewarded for it because you're at least assured you're working towards something rather than the random dice rolls or resorting to trading post, which isn't fun for many players. Number 5. Build templates. What was another thing we saw with this feature patch that came out? The idea in PvP of being able to easily swap your build around. You cannot currently save your build in Guild Wars 2, and you cannot currently go online and download a build from somewhere else and have it in a nice library for yourself, but I think that will be coming in the next feature pack. You can currently already see they've paved the way for this in PvP. You have your own window for your build, and there is available space on there for another tab. I think we'll just be getting another tab added to this, where you can click through and you can load or save builds as you wish, and this will be transferred over to PvE also for quick swapping. ArenaNet have definitely swung in the direction recently that you should be able to change your build in Guild Wars 2 whenever the hell you want. If you're smart enough to find a build that gets you through a certain bit of content, they don't want to place restrictions on that. That's a big difference to the way the first game functioned. Most of the fun and challenge from the first game came from theory crafting and setting up a build and then putting it to the test, and if it didn't work, tough luck, you got kicked out and then you could try again. Guild Wars 2 is completely in the other direction now. It's incredibly open and free, and this will just add to that. You guys probably have already seen so many comments in the community of people saying, hey, now that swapping my traits is free, I'm doing it so much, please let us save and load them. They're looking at that. That's going to be in the next feature pack, I'm almost sure of it. Number 6. Legendary trinkets. Namely, I believe we will be getting a single new class of legendary item with the next feature pack. It won't be new legendary weapons. I don't think we'll see a new generation of legendary weapons for a while. I believe if they ever do any kind of large update drop, whether you call it an expansion or not, that will be when we get a second generation of legendary weapons. I think that next they are going to be looking at legendary trinkets. These are things we've heard come from the devs' mouths before, and I think it won't be all 6 pieces can become legendary. It's just they're going to pick on one and I think the one they're going to choose is the back piece. Currently, out of your trinkets, the only one that has a visible change on your character is the back piece, and so to address the idea of adding, say, legendary amulets, legendary rings, or accessories means adding a whole bunch more into the gear system, especially on the back end, I can only assume, and for back pieces, it's pretty much set there for them. Further, there is a large unresolved element of the back piece system in Guild Wars 2, and this is the idea of capes. Capes were there in the betas, they were visible, you could see NPCs wearing them, you could see they were potential things for players to wear. Way before launch, it was mentioned that capes were going to be a thing, but shortly before release, they were removed from the game. Why? Supposedly because of clipping issues, but I've heard contradictions on this myself, though it has always been stated this is something they are looking to put back in. I think if they add legendary trinkets, it makes most sense for them to focus on the back piece, and wouldn't this be a great time for them to add capes as well? So I believe, maybe not exclusively, but capes will come into Guild Wars 2 as legendary items. I think considering the history of the franchise also, and the fact that in the first game, pretty much every player ever had a cape, and the idea of wearing a cape was something very iconic to this franchise before, bringing them back at legendary status only makes a lot of sense. There are many cool things you can do with capes, the designs that you see on capes, and the way that particle effects can interact with them, so I think they're perfect candidates, and that's what we'll be seeing in the next feature pack. One more type of legendary, and it'll be capes. How sure I am on this wavers a little bit, and this is why it's a little bit lower on the list, but it's definitely up there. Number 7. Guild missions and a world boss update. Now, for the record, if this was a list of what I'd be most excited to see, this would be at place number 1, not number 7. What I'm talking about here is the idea of expanding on the kind of guild missions that are in Guild Wars 2 and how they interact with world bosses. With the current feature patch, we saw the devs normalize the spawns of many of the world bosses in the game, relegated them all to 15-minute slots, and I have no doubt that one of those slots that currently says TBD will be filled up thanks to Season 2 of The Living World. But I think when the next feature pack comes around, they're going to expand on this further. What I would most like to see them do is allow guilds to not only pop a wide variety of big bosses in the game, not just the Great Jungle Worm, the Karka Queen, and Tequatl, but many more. I want to see them let us pop any world boss we want and have tiers. Much like many guild missions in Guild Wars 2 have different tiers of difficulty, world bosses should have that too. And in this way they can add new world bosses like Triple Trouble and have them tuned for your average player. Maybe a little bit more difficult than most encounters, so they're not totally brain dead and zergy, but easy enough for your average player. Then let guilds pop more difficult versions and more rewarding versions of those encounters. Just like World of Warcraft added heroics, Guild Wars 2 needs that hardcore endgame stuff. You cannot call, though it is still the most difficult thing in Guild Wars 2 for large groups to complete, you cannot call Triple Trouble Worm super hardcore anymore. You definitely can't for Tech, and you definitely can't for the Karka Queen. This is a huge player base that ArenaNet is not currently satisfying, and I think they know that. Their change with the current feature pack to allow them to pop their own stuff and incorporate it into the guild mission system is genius, as long as they add these difficulty tiers and balance rewards to suit. Make these things really difficult for those who want to do it. And maybe it's my own bias for being so excited about this idea, but it makes too much sense for me to think they're just going to ignore it in the next feature patch. However, appreciating that bias, it comes at number 7 because I'm a bit wobbly on whether they'll really do it. I'd love to see that they would. It depends on how much faith you've got in them. Number 8. New weapons. This, again, is another thing that's come up a lot, especially since the launch of the game. Many people think it's criminal that Guild Wars 2 has so few weapons available, especially to some classes. Therefore, I do believe it is quite likely we will be seeing new weapons. Earlier, I put forward an argument for why new traits and new classes of utility skills were coming into this game. I use those same arguments here for weapons. Weapons, though, being much more serious of a new thing to implement in the game, come way lower down on my list. I think they're going to be very cautious about any new weapons that they add, and they have to be very meticulous with the balance on them. But certainly some classes are lacking weapon variety, and I do think they have a wide enough pool of weapons out there in the game to start spreading them out. Namely, I'm talking about Engineer and I'm talking about Thief. The Engineer has 3 weapons to its name. It has Pistol, it has Shield, and it has Rifle. Yes, kits are a main mechanic of the class, but it's not enough, and I think they appreciate that. I think Engineer is the greatest candidate to get a new weapon in this game. Probably something like a hammer or a mace. At the end of the day, if you ignore kits as well, they don't really have a satisfactory melee option available to them. And Thief as well doesn't have that many weapons available to it. I think if you want to be really optimistic about this kind of update, they may add one new weapon to every single class in the game from the existing pool of weapons. So, for example, adding Greatsword to Necromancer. But if they did that, I would also expect Engineer and Thief to get 2 new weapons, just to bring them a little bit closer into the general balance of the other classes. Though Elementalist has very few weapons available to it, each weapon on its own is basically 4 weapons, and it's a tall order for the devs to introduce new ones to that class, so I don't think it should be very high up there. Unless it was just an offhand they give, and then it's not so bad. Do consider there have been for a while data mineable item codes you can still ping in game that show stuff like halberds and entirely new weapons in Guild Wars 2. I don't think entirely new weapons will be added for a while, maybe when they finally decide to add a new profession, but the idea of adding a new profession doesn't make my top 10 list of likely stuff for the next feature pack, sadly. I'm talking about things like halberds, which we've seen, and scythes too, namely, for a supposed new 3rd heavy armor class. Number 9. Working our way down the list, in keeping with things that people have wanted since launch, mini-pet UI refinements. Mini-pets were a huge part of the first game. They're a huge part of many MMOs, frankly. They're a big part of the look and feel of your character. You know, they're an extension to the way you can customize your appearance. Mini-pets should be a bigger deal than they currently are, but they're not. Why? Because you constantly have to be double-clicking them. I believe even a minor quality of life change for mini-pets that, for example, stops them being stowed when you die, stops them being stowed when you enter a dungeon, stops them being stowed when you swap any map, would be huge. But I think when they finally address this, they will give us a full UI for them and give us just a slot on our hero panel, a new page on our hero panel where we can choose a mini we wish to be representing. And even if we log out of the game, when we come back in, that mini pet will be there and available to us, with the option, of course, to hide it whenever we want. I think one of the big reasons mini pets have been neglected for a while and have only had really minor changes, like that one change that stopped you being able to automatically deposited when you use the deposit all collectibles option, is because they originally wanted to tie mini pets into some kind of activity, some kind of variant perhaps of polymorph. There were signs of arenas and things around Guild Wars 2, but I think finally they're dropping this idea and should just give us the features we want. Again, if you want to be very optimistic too, I think a very interesting idea with the mini pet system would be as people climb achievement point ranks, as you get to the, say, 10,000 tier, 20,000, even 30,000, thinking about the future, you should be able to unlock the ability to represent more than one mini. But again, remember that the main cause of lag in this game is having too many entities in a specific server. If everybody summons fire elementals and ogre pet whistles, for example, it can cause massive lag, and I'm sure mini pets are not exempt from this, so that may not be something we ever see. Anyway, perhaps a small feature, but one that many people want, and it comes at number 9 on the list. Last, but maybe not least to some people, at number 10, I've got the idea of an update to ore and meta events. This feature pack sort of ignored ore in many respects, especially concerning the idea of normalizing world bosses and relegating them all to specific times. ArenaNet have always had a very specific vision of ore, the way that those meta events are supposed to work, the push-pull idea of attacking and defending against the Risen, working your way into ore that they've expressed in multiple interviews. They've also expressed the fact that ore doesn't quite hit where they originally wanted it to be, and it's something they've been looking into. I'm not sure how high they consider it to be a priority, or how far their work on an update to ore has been, but I am positive we will eventually see a large change to the way that area works, a change to the way that the god temples interact with the various maps. Do not forget that this feature patch broke what was once interesting about those god temples, and I think the reason why they're happy for it to break is because they know that change is coming along. On a wider scale outside of just ore, I think the game is full of loads of meta events. You can pick any map you like in the game. An example I used in a very recent video was Fireheart Rise, the meta event in the southwest corner with the Grawl. There are lots of meta events, and the meta events were really the embodiment, the biggest, coolest thing about their dynamic event system, and that's kind of a hallmark of what Guild Wars 2 is. And yet these meta events have fallen further and further away from players' interests in terms of the rewards they give and the gameplay they involve. I think the devs are not happy with the way meta events in general work, and we could be seeing, along with a big update to ore, which is essentially comprised of entirely meta events, Some reward rebalance to encourage people to go out and explore many more of those. Yes, we've got people doing world bosses daily. What about the big meta events that don't end with a giant boss? Shouldn't these be rewarding for us also? Karma can only get you so far, and many of these things will be outclassed by quick cycling small events that aren't tied to metas, such as what you see in Edge of the Mist and so forth. I think that's a deficient area of Guild Wars 2, something they're definitely looking at with regards to ore, and maybe on a global scale too, and this could be something we see in the next feature pack, but maybe kind of unlikely. At the end of the day, it is number 10 on my list. And there you go, guys. That's my top 10 most likely things I think will be coming in the next feature pack. A bit of what I really want, a bit of what I think just makes sense. And I really want to hear what you guys want. There's so much that I haven't even touched on. I haven't touched on the idea of new features for World vs. World or TPVP. I haven't touched on the idea of dungeons, and this is truly because I believe they won't touch dungeons. I don't think that they're happy with where dungeons are, but I think that's a huge job for them to sort out. And I think the only thing really for competitive or difficult 5-man content we'll get over this next 6-month period is probably to fractals. I think when they do finally touch dungeons, they're either just going to remove them completely and give us some new ones, or they're going to seriously look at the idea of giving us hard mode in dungeons and gambits that we can toggle on or off. And the more gambits we have on, say for example, oh, there is no more downstate, you just go dead straight away, or changing the way that the AI works, these will make dungeons more rewarding and engaging to play, but that's a huge job. I just don't think the devs are looking at that stuff. What do you want, though? That's what I want in the comments. I want to see what people really want. What are the huge things that either maybe made you quit the game and you're not coming back until it's there, or you just cannot understand how it's been this way since launch and it needs to be fixed? If we get enough discussion going, I want to do another video where I talk about generally what the community wants, and we'll compare that to maybe what my original thoughts were with this feature pack video here. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you found it interesting, and I will see you again tomorrow for another video. Take care.